Well, hello everybody, and welcome on in to Global Hack Week. I'm going to go ahead and do a couple of things. First and foremost, make sure that you go ahead and use that check-in link right on the bottom here to check into our event. Make sure that you've gotten the chance to get this sweet swag points. And then what I'm going to go ahead and do is open it up to kind of get us settled, talk a little bit about what we did in part 1, and then continue on to part 2 of the stream. So we've got a couple of things planned for today, kind of lots of different small ideas and kind of options for things that I might want to include, and general options here that I want to add in as additions. So that's the plan for today and for the remainder of the stream. What I'm going to do really quickly now is go ahead and share the GitHub profile for this stream for this repository as well. So this is the repository that we worked on during most of the stream yesterday. Sorry, there we go. But if we go ahead and take a look here, this is the repository that we worked on for most of the stream yesterday. So if you want to take a look at some of the things that we got accomplished in part 1, that's what I would recommend to check out first and foremost. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and kind of walk you through some of the things that we did. And after we do that, we'll go ahead and continue on and then jump into Visual Studio Code and talk a little bit more about what we've got planned there. So if I go ahead and share my screen here, there we go. Beautiful. Alrighty. So as we jump in here, all right, what we've got is just our kind of initial layout from yesterday, a very quick README that contains a brief description of what to do, just in case you want to make changes to it. And then also our, let me make sure I turn my notifications off so it's not too loud. There you go. That'll help. And then we've also got our README, our index.html file, right, which has all of this lovely information, right, about our developer, our script.js, right, which has some of our scripting tools for our projects. And the last but certainly not least, our style.css file, which has some of our styling added for the project that we have worked on so far. So what I wanted to focus on today is get a couple of things done. Hello. Is get a couple of things done. And what I want to do there is just jump right on in to editing some of our code and working through some of the changes I generally want to implement. So in here, let me open this back up. And then we've got a couple more people in here now. Hello, everybody. If you're looking to check in, make sure you go ahead and use that link right in underneath my face. And then as always, if you have any questions in the chat, feel free to ask them away. And then I'm going to jump in and get to sharing a portion of my code. And we'll walk through some of the things that I want to talk about today. So I'm going to go ahead and swap my screen share real quick to my index.html file. And there you go. Beautiful. So in here, I have my index.html file, right? And my lovely website that I worked on yesterday with y'all. Then we have our JavaScript file and our style.css, which is kind of what we talked about yesterday. Now, what I wanted to do today is focus a little bit on, first of all, building out this to make it more of an example of what I would expect potentially a student to have. So in here, I've created a fake little persona for our student. So what we're going to do is we're going to replace some of this information with more realistic additions here. So John Doe is still going to be our lovely student, but he will be studying computer science student and aspiring web, or we'll do aspiring developer. And then we do want to make sure that we stick with our capitalization here, right? For good titles here, just keep in mind, right, if you are looking to replicate this on your own, title doesn't have to be fancy. It just has to be something that is honest and straight to the point. And so then in here, hi, I'm John Doe, a passion. Let's see here. I have something short written out here that I wanted to add in. A computer science student who enjoys, I'm going to close the preview because it's going to annoy me how it's jumping up and down whenever I edit things. But who, well, GitHub Copilot's already trying to take it away. Enjoys building interactive websites and learning more about how technology works behind the scenes. I am especially interested in front and web development and creating user-friendly interfaces. Great, there you go. So that's my lovely little example, right? And then in here, what I also did is I added a quick little paragraph tag to just kind of add some additional section of my text. And then I said, I built this portfolio to practice some of my HTML, CSS, and JavaScript skills, and to showcase some of my favorite projects. There you go. And then, so that is the About Me section in here. Then we also have the little skills section, right, that I've added. So in here, we have a little bit of, potential skills that this lovely student has worked on. So in here, we would do HTML, right? And then in CSS, we could also add additional like Flexbox, responsive design. And then in here, we could jump in and add in JavaScript. And then we could also add in Git and GitHub. And then finally, web accessibility, right? Maybe introductory or web accessibility. So let's see here. Hello, I'm just joining. Well, I'm happy that you're here. You haven't missed much yet. We're just jumping into part one. If you want to take a look at the repository to kind of get yourself caught up with what we did yesterday, that's what you can find in there. And hello as well. So this repository is going to have all the information that you may need for part one. And then for today, you can feel free to follow along with me. You can start over with that repository. You can start with that repository from scratch. Or you can start from my repository as a launch point. You can start from scratch. You can code along with me. You can just kind of tune in and listen. Whatever you would like, feel free to just kind of join in as you wish. Now in here, from the tools and or from the skills section, the skills here, right, describe some of the tools that we're more familiar with. Is this my favorite skills section in the world? No. Is it a good example of something to include on like a website for the purposes of demoing this portfolio? Absolutely, right? And then in here, what I did is if we go to our script JavaScript file, right? So I'm going to go ahead and do this, and I'm going to remove my my split screen here. I've just made it bigger. My bad. Let's just close these out. If we go in here, right, my script.javascript file just contains my project, and I have my website, my task manager, and my block platform, I went ahead and also added potentially another app that we could focus on adding here. And this is just to kind of expand on some of the options. So what I also added as 2 apps for my example student is that quick little link option. And I kind of spoiled my idea for later with the tags here. So I'm going to go ahead and tab this over, and tab this over here, right? But generally, this is kind of what I'm looking for my project. I also added a new project, right? I'm going to fix the indentations here as well. My weather dashboard and my study planner. So these are 5 potential projects that I've worked on. Why did I pick these? And hello, for those of you who have just joined in, why did I pick these? They sound relatively real student projects. They kind of increase in complexity. I would say if I really wanted them to increase in complexity, I would potentially put the task manager and the study planner together kind of in an order. And then that weather dashboard, I would say the fact that we are fetching real-time data for a public API and displaying current conditions would probably make that the more complicated project. For creating and sharing blog posts, if it's just personal, then it's probably lower. If it's something that has, tools and resources like authentication or something similar, then it becomes a little bit more intense. And I would say that an argument can be made for moving it from the top to the bottom. Now, if we look in here, right, we also have our displays project section. And then this is actually responsible for grabbing all of that code that we've written up here and continued in here. Now, if we take a look at my contact section, I have in here potentially some of my contact information, right? So contact me. If you'd like to get in touch, feel free to send me an email, right? What we're also going to do in here for part 2, if you're curious, is we're going to add a form for emails in here. And then what we're also going to do is add in a couple of different options for different resources. And then in here, and then in here, what I'm going to do is I could also add in a GitHub or a LinkedIn link, right? So maybe potentially I could do a or potentially something like an H3 maybe, right, where I could say my links, and then I would start, a ordered list or an unordered list with some line items. And I would say here, a href, and then right in there, put $GitHub, right? And that would finish up my GitHub link here, right? And then in here, if I were to go ahead and proceed through this portion, right, potentially do my LinkedIn or something similar. And in this case, what this does is because Alex Morgan is not a real person, right? If you are these little hashtags, just aim to replace that with real options. So what I'm going to do now really quickly is I'm going to preview my page so you can kind of see. Also, I just said Alex and Joe. I keep flip-flopping back and forth. But you can kind of see what my website looks like at this point, right? So I've got my projects portfolio. They kind of take up, a solid amount of portions. They are somewhat responsive. Goodness, my dog is scooting around on the floor being a silly boy. Anyway, if you take a look here, right, we also did some light mode and dark mode toggles down here as well. And generally just worked on some like scroll and some features that have to do with that here. But that is all from part 1. What I want to focus on today is a couple of things first and foremost. So one of the things I first wanted to do is add in a little contact form for us. So if we take a look at right where I put this comment, I have added a nice little section. So in here, right, the idea behind this is just a quick way to reach out and contact somebody, right? So directly on the website, if you want to give them feedback, it's a cute way to kind of talk about forms and input and responsiveness and work on some of the skills that we talked about in part 1. So in here, if I jump in, right, first thing I'm going to do is close out of this preview again, because it could be a headache that we're jumping around like crazy. I'm saying if you'd like to get in touch, feel free to reach out via email. And then I'm also going to say, or use the form below. Right, so in this case, if I now jump in here, what I'm going to do is in between my paragraph tags and my H3, I'm going to go ahead and create a form. And my form is going to have an ID, right? And I'm just going to go ahead and name it contact form. I'll make sure that I'm out of these. And then in here, right, this is the opening and closing tag. And you can see that GitHub Copilot, it's giving me a couple of ideas here for options, right? So it's telling me, okay, I have a label for name, and then I should have an input type of text with the ID name, right? The name actually being name and making it required. And then I should have a label for email. Right. Now, why do I have these double BRs at the end here? I'm going to go ahead and try to remove these and see what happens out of curiosity. Could be... Now, I might need a refresher. What does the BR tag do? Let's see. BR line break. That makes sense, actually. Let's keep those then. So I'm going to do a line break in between name, and then 2 line breaks in between email, and then line break in between message, and then a submit button, right? So if I were to load this up in my preview and then go in here, right, this is my little basic form and what that looks like, right? And we also have my little link section. So we've got a couple of changes. Break tag, thank you. I, for some reason, blanked on that one. I've been doing a lot of like HR tags as dividers, but not a lot of break recently. But you know what? It happens. Now, if we go in here and we take a look at my form, for some reason, it's been really annoying with the scroll here. It's trying to skip to the portion that matches my index now that I've added smooth scroll. I'm going to go ahead and turn that off here. But as we go in here, right, we've got our form, and then we've got potentially some portions. So in here, right, our ID is going to keep track of that identifier that we'll use for our form. For our type, right, that's the sort of information that we'll include. The ID, right, is the actual identifier that we use to grab it. And then the name is, of course, what is the actual input field called. And then is it required or not? And then how many rows are we dedicating to that section? And then as well as creating a text area versus an input here. Now I also have an input here, submit value submit. Maybe instead of input, let me try button here. And I want to see what the difference is between these two. Need a closing tag for button. Oh my goodness, this preview is gonna be the death of me. So submit, and then send, and then submit as the actual text of the button instead of send. So let's take a look. This is my version control. Nope, go back. I don't want to take a look at my working tree. Thank you. Just want to go ahead and be able to get down here, right? And then I have my nice little submit button. Cool. And I do, looks like, have some basic form responsivity, right? Because it's required from that required tag. But what I want to be able to do, what would be the difference between portfolio in a blog versus like a website? So if we're talking about in terms of like how I've seen it done in practice, I would say portfolios are more often static or like minimally dynamic sites that just kind of show off what you're currently doing, like what you've worked on, what you are like currently interested in, opportunities that you're looking for, maybe some things like job experience or similar. Whereas blogs, if we're talking about like the engineering sense of a blog, are more so to like document, what project you're currently working on, like maybe potentially like what I think of more of a blog is like when people post articles to sites like Medium, right? Or look at specific resources in that regard. What can be helpful there is like then keeping track of like your technology progress, or like maybe potentially like sharing some tool or some resources, something that you learned with everybody else. I almost think of like portfolio more as like a digital resume. And I think generally if you are, a developer of some sort, or you have an engineering background, or you have some sort of technology experience, they're pretty like a pretty cool addition to have. As I have mentioned in other streams, but haven't gotten yet a chance to mention, I teach high school, and I teach high school computer science. And one of the things I'm going to do with some of my web development classes later this year is they're going to work on their own little portfolio site. So they'll talk about things that they're interested in, their hobbies, job experiences, maybe some of their passions and things like that. Obviously, they're on the younger side. I teach freshmen and sophomore students for the most part. So they're, 14, 15 years old. So they might not have, job experience to post on there or something similar. But as long as, they can tell me a little bit about me, make like a little personal website with some of the things that they're passionate about, that's kind of the goal. Sometimes they get confused what blogs actually even mean or are supposed to be like. Yeah, absolutely. And the words are kind of used interchangeably. And if you ask different people, they'll have different definitions of what they mean. But for me personally, like at the very least, what I've seen and the way that I've seen it like defined, within the circles that I look at, which is A, mostly education, but B, also like in engineering and in tech, it tends to be like the actual blog bit is, you being like, here are the 10 lessons I've learned from working with Flutter for the first time this year, right? Or like how to make XYZ, or like how to make your first Swift app, right? Whereas here it's more so of like a personal portfolio / like something that you've created. Hi, Freddie. Wow, amazing. Teaching is a great profession to be in. It can be really, really rewarding. It can also be really hard. There are benefits and there are drawbacks always, but I am really happy with where I'm at in terms of work. Let's take a look here. What I'm going to jump into next is taking a look at my style.css file. So in here, I want to add some nice little styling to my form. So, all right, cool. So I'm going to go and put it, I've been trying to harp more in alphabetical order. So I'm going to go ahead and organize here. And I'm going to start with my form. And then I'm also going to go ahead and start with my form input and form text area. Right. And then I want to go ahead and cut this out here because I'm not going to do that right now. And then I also want to do my form button. Cool. So this is all of my code added for these sections. I'm going to go and kind of walk through these properties a little bit as I write them out, tell you what I'm doing here, and then we'll start here. So first of all, for my form, I'm going to try to do a display grid here. And then we'll also try to do a gap of, we'll try 0.5 rem today. Let's do a max width of 450 and then a margin auto. I wish that when I asked it to autofill the semicolons, that sometimes it just didn't actually like leave me hanging on those. Now, the most annoying part is that I have to click refresh on this index.html every time, which is a little bit frustrating now that I'm not actually editing the index.html as often. But there you go, right? Name, email, message. Now, I am actually, on second glance here, and oh, it's so annoying. Oh, I have to scroll on the input. There you go. That makes sense. I actually don't like how much break there is in here. So I'm going to actually remove these break lines. I think the styling will account for most of the breaks that I want. But then again, we'll see. So I'll go ahead and I should just accept these changes here and then do GitHub and then continue from there. So not built with agent. Where's my preview? There you go. So now if I look in here, right, that looks a little bit better styling wise. So it's hopefully helpful. I made this project last year. Oh, nice. Yeah, it's really fun. And, generally I always recommend, right, like going through one. If you have one, it's always nice to kind of like refresh it and remake it and see some of the things that you've learned. Or also like potentially give yourself some other practice. I've always found that to be kind of a more positive way to approach it. So, there's kind of lots of different options to go about it. I've remade my like little portfolio sites more times than I can count at this point. But, generally, I think it's still fun to actually go through and work with it. So now if we go in here, let's take a look at some of my form input. And my text area, I'm going to do a nice little border radius. I want to do, yeah, and then padding. And then let's see here. If I try this instead, I want to see what that looks like in terms of my actual form output here. There we go. So name, email, and message. I'm not actually seeing my border here be the color of my, oh, it is my text color. There you go. And then is, of course, kind of rounding in here. So there you go. And then I could also go for maybe like a 2-pixel border instead. And then maybe try border radius here. Maybe try something like 5. Let's see what that looks like instead. I have to go back to index and I preview. I feel like I should find a better way to actually look at my site instead of, oh, not too thick. That might be too thick. I think I'll go back to 1.5 maybe. We'll try that. We'll see how that works. I always feel bad messing around with my borders. I'm like, that isn't quite right. No, that isn't quite right either. And then we'll continue from there. There you go. That looks better. Cool. And then I close my CSS file. I'm going to go ahead and open it back up. Close out of this menu in here. And then close out of here. There you go. And then, and I close out of my file again. You know what? Close out of this. Not my outline. I want my portfolio, my style.css. There you go. I should just figure out a better way to run these. Hold on. I forgot everything because I got distracted and all that kind of stuff. I'm struggling to be consistent. We'll focus on fellowship though. Any suggestions? For staying consistent and getting stuff done, I mean, honestly, I think the thing that is the most rewarding is, you know, any sort of deadline that you can give yourself. For context, I just applied to grad school and I will be starting this summer, which is very exciting. But, you know, kind of the now renewed tenacity that I have towards, you know, like going back to school and wanting to do really well and all of those things, I think has kind of been pushing me more towards getting some of the things done. So for consistency, I think the main thing for me has been in that regard of like knowing that I'm setting future myself up for success, knowing that I'm going back to school, that school costs money, that it's not free, that I have, you know, learned a lot since I was last in school, which was not that long ago, but it also has been a decent while, that I'm learning a lot from my students and how they approach learning and lots of other things that has made it more exciting. So that it has made it a little bit more exciting. And then, okay, I do have the live preview plugin, right? That's what I thought. And then, but what instead I want to see is if I can is do I have live server? Why do I feel like I don't? There you go. And then also live preview. And then what I want to do is go to index.html and then I right click on my HTML file. All right, let's try this. And then click open preview. Okay, there we go. Cool. Or click show preview maybe. Show on browser, open with live server. Okay, that actually boots it up on the website. Very cool. All right, so that lets me kind of keep it running off to this side while we all work, which will be pretty helpful. But to go back and answer your question, I think the main thing is just like giving yourself some deadlines, giving yourself some long-term goals. All right, so if your goal is really to, you know, like get some sort of job experience or some internship experience this year, the main thing is, you know, like look for great opportunities. Obviously, do your best on those applications, but also like keep in mind and diversify, right? There's so many great programs out there that you can take a look at that, just getting ready for those or reading about those or preparing for those is already going to make you better. So there's really no harm in going and trying out for multiple different opportunities. And so I would say that is my main piece of advice. Look up the resources that are there, learn from previous attendees, right? Learn from previous fellows if you're talking about fellowship, right? See what they have to offer. Just off the top of my head, some of the coaches that are running like live streams at the MLH Fellowship, or not at the MLH Fellowship, live streams at Global Hack Week are former MLH fellows. So they have, like whether they, necessarily have advice for like how to get into the program. To be honest, most of us don't. Most of us don't like really have a direct say in the fellowship, and the ones of us that do, want to go ahead and make sure that we're giving, treating that process with the respect and the time that it deserves. However, keeping that in mind, otherwise, if you're looking for like tips or advice or things that they're building or their experiences, I would say that, any like MLH coach is always happy to chat about some of the things that they've done. How much information they'll give you, it depends. But that is generally helpful. But yeah, it's definitely hard to keep those skills sharp and kind of make sure that you're staying on top of things. So I totally get that. What I want to do in here is I'm going to open preview. Yes, cool. And then in here, so if I go to style.css, and then I want to try some background color. Where is my button from earlier? I think I want to try the same styling for my button here as maybe my button there. So let's see. And then let me go ahead and head to index.html, click open preview, and take a look at my button here. So this is my lovely button. I would say on this background, it might make a little bit more sense to, instead of doing border color here, maybe do like 1.5 pixels solid var, and then instead of text color, do that primary color as that border. Now, if I preview index.html, right, we'll have to re-preview it, which makes sense. Maybe it's probably the spacing here that's throwing me off. Let me fix this up. Cursor, and then border radius 0.5 rem. Cool, except in this order. There we go. Border radius, cursor, and padding. Beautiful. And there we go. Okay, now my button has some styling. If I would click open preview, I can show it to you real quick. That looks a little bit better. That is quite funny because I've been harping on students about spacing the last couple of days, and then I went ahead and made the same mistake myself. But just in case here, in case you're not familiar, the form, right, display, if you ever are not sure how to do something, what I also like is the explain feature of GitHub Copilot, right? And I can go ahead and, potentially like change one of my agents, right? Or ask it a question, or use specific models and so on and so forth. So it tells me for some options here, right? Potentially for potential enhancements, is there a specific issue, or would you like help with something else? So it's asking solid questions here and kind of helping us figure out what to do. Now, if we are going to go ahead and continue in here, we're going to handle some of our form submissions in JavaScript. So in here, I have a couple of functions, one for my project, one for my theme toggle, and then in here. So what I'm going to do is, because my form submit is in between my theme toggle and my project display, I'm going to go ahead and add it in here. So I'm going to create a constant for form, and that's going to get my form. And then I'm going to say for my form, I want to add an event submit a listener for a function. And then I want to prevent a default for page loading, give some text context, and then reset the form. All right, so thank you for reaching out. I will get back to you as soon as possible. And so now if I go to index.html, I refresh my page, reopen my little preview. All right, let's see what happens. Except I want to actually open it in a full section. Oh my goodness, now I have like 4 million tabs open. Yeah, open preview. There you go. So now if I take a look at this, right, if I type in some example, test name, test email at email.com, message hello, right, and go ahead and press submit. All right, this case nothing happened though, which is slightly concerning. So I'm going to go ahead and try it here again. So it's telling me to please fill out this field. I wonder why that happened though. Why did the actual submission not work here? So let's take a look at event listener submit. Yeah. Function event. So let's see. I'm going to try it on the official version here, maybe with a real email. Now if I press submit, thank you for reaching out. I'll get back to you soon. Okay, so I do need to be outside of the preview in order to see it. So in case you're familiar or you're running into issues yourself, that's kind of the main thing we need to fix up here. All right, let's take a look at what we can do next. I think it would be really fun, and I did some things here, to filter some of my projects and expand some of this feature with some tags. So I kind of spoiled this earlier, but I went ahead and added this tags feature for, you know, some of the things that I might have worked on in terms of tools and ideas for projects and so on and so forth. So in here, we've got React, JavaScript, local storage, right? Making sure that spacing is consistent here and so on, right? And then in here, let's take a look at some tag ideas. We got Node.js, Express, MongoDB, apparently. Okay, so we're kind of expanding our tech stack here. I guess we'll also stick with React here because you really silly have a blog website with a back end and no front end. And then in here, we have JavaScript, API, HTML, CSS. So in here, we've got a couple of things, right, that are useful for kind of creating this tag system. First of all, this helps your website stay more organized, especially as you build or you create more projects. Oh, hi, buddy. My dog is being the #1 fan of my streams today. He's just been laying here and listening the whole time. What a good coding pal. As I was saying, though, one of the big benefits of this is that, it helps our website get more manageable and get more kind of usable, even as the amount of projects expands. So it gives us some more longevity. It makes our data here, for the purposes here, a little bit more exciting. Gives us some options for, things to do. And then, just kind of helps us create a more exciting website. So what we're going to do next is we're going to go into our project section. And then in here, right above my project list, I'm going to go ahead and add in a new section for my filters. So D is going to be equal to project filters, right? And then I'll add in here, and it's telling me, right, for potential expansions, it's given me lots of examples, right? So HTML, CSS, JavaScript, React, Node.js, or API. So in this case, would I recommend doing all of those? I'd probably get rid of Node.js here, just because we only have one project. But we have multiple projects that belong to HTML, CSS category, multiple projects that we have done in React. Only one project with an API, though, so I would also probably remove this one. and then potentially stick with these categories down here. Now, could we add more categories? Of course. I am unclear about what skill set level is needed and what kind of projects are enough to get in so that I can plan. Honestly, that second question, it really depends. And also that first one, like I don't have a clear-cut answer. I've heard of MLH fellows being everything from fresh high school graduates to postdocs in specific fields of studies, career changers, you know, kind of a whole big array of individuals. So there isn't really like a clear-cut answer of what skill sets or levels are needed. The one piece of advice that I would offer is that especially if you're applying for our Web3 or our, what is the name of the track that I'm clicking on? I'm going to go ahead and, whether you're applying for whichever track that you're applying for, right? And you know, the tracks do differ. There is the open source track, right? If you're thinking of contributing to the open source track, you should potentially have contributed to open source in the past. At the very least, I would mention like how you've been trying to explore open source. Have you looked into Hacktoberfest? Have you taken a look at, you know, some of the different options? Have you made an open source contribution? Things like that. If we're talking about like our production engineering or our Web3 engineering track, you should have ideally experience specifically exploring those fields. For software engineering fellowship track, it's more of a specific kind of, right, like more general like resources and helpful tools. Now that I'm looking at it, is there, maybe I'm missing something. I will always point you to the MLH Discord if you have questions about anything related to the fellowship. I'm not seeing an open source track now that I look at it again. So maybe I'm missing something. Open source track, example schedule, read fellow reviews, developer education, English communication, time zone, coding ability, AV setup, and education. Yeah, so in here, right, your coding ability, code proficiently, at least one programming language. You have to be over the age of 18, right? Make sure you meet all those specific requirements. But then generally, I would say, yeah, why is it? Is it just talking about the fact that you'll do all of the sections in open source? Because, I mean, yes, that makes sense, but yeah, there you go. So I'd say that. And then what I always recommend for, you know, like any sort of things related to the fellowship is apply early. Yeah. So then if you want to do the software engineering track, apply for the software engineering track. You know, or if you want to do the product engineering track, apply for the product engineering track, or the site reliability engineering track. However, the main recommendation that I always send to fellows is, or aspiring fellows, is apply early because we do rolling admissions. In other words, the strong applications, right? We can read if you're applying too close to the deadline, spots have already been filled by people who applied and accepted their spots early. So in other words, right, we don't know how many fellows we're going to get, right? How many applications we're going to get by the deadline, right? We want to make sure that instead of waiting until the very end, until the mass influx of applications, that process is spread out over a little bit longer period of time. So the team has time to review it, which means that, you know, invites and interviews are being sent out when not everybody has sent in their applications yet. So I always recommend for the fellowship applying as early as you can to make sure you still have the strongest application. So I would prepare before the application is relatively due, you know, potentially take a look at previous applications to kind of figure out those questions, continue that advice from there. Anyway, what I'm going to do now is head on over to my script.js file. I'm going to do this, add this code after my project constants, but before my display projects, right? It's kind of related. So I want to make sure that these two exist together. So I'm going to create const filters, and then document query selection for my filter button, right? Button data filter all, yeah. I wonder if I should stick, instead of filters, I should do project filters in here. So maybe instead I'll try document.getElementById. And then in that, I will do project filters. There you go. And then I'll add an event listener click if the event contains filter button. I want to get the attribute and then filter that project. Right. And then in here, I want to create my filter project functions. So I want to get all of the projects and then go ahead and actually filter those, add in that section, and then add in that code down here. So in here now, if I go ahead and preview my project, we'll see what happens. I have now some little buttons that I can click on, right, that swap the projects that are showing up. What I want to add, I think, as a nice feature is so what I'm going to do is grab that and then continue on from there. So as we go ahead and continue, I'm going to hop into my CSS here, head to my filters button section. So that will be after before my footer here. So I do my hashtag filter buttons, right? Perfect. And then in here, I'm going to add in some border, right, which I want to do as 1 pixel solid and then of my primary color, right, which I've selected earlier. And then I will say my padding, right, so I can do 0.5 IREM, sure. I mean, I can try text align center element. Yeah, cool. And then maybe potentially some border radius. Also try my cursor pointer and then go ahead and do that. Except I want to keep track of am I correct in approaching this here? I'll go ahead and figure this out. So instead of, I think what I want to do is just do this. So border pixel that. And I think that should cover it. I'm going to go ahead and close out the preview and just confirm. So now if I click on it, nothing happens. That's fine. But then filter class or filter buttons. Maybe let me try project filters button.active instead. So we'll go back here. Project dash filters button.active. Then go ahead and hit this open preview. We click on one of these guys. Okay, nothing's still happening with these. Just slightly annoying. But let's see. Did I end up adding the button styling? Right, I thought I did. Padding, border radius, border, cursor, body.dark mode, footer. Could have sworn I added styling to the other button. Yeah, the form button. There you go. So in this case, what I would want is for this button to be the similar styling here. And then, so in here, all right, if I were to try this index.html again, and open up that preview, that's the README preview. No, I don't want that. Open preview. Okay, so it's Shift Command V. So there I should just be able to do Shift Command V. Okay, cool. Now if I click on it, still nothing happens. Okay, that's slightly annoying. Yeah, of course. I'm happy to always answer questions if I'm on stream, even if they're not related to the content that we're actually talking about. You know, one of the benefits of getting to stream to y'all is that we get to have a nice little chat about some of the things that we're doing. All right, now let's take a look here. All right, let me see here. I'm gonna go ahead and open up. That's kind of funny, but I'm gonna actually take a look at index.html and my style.css and my script.js file, and then say currently the purple border is not showing around the selected filter for my project section. Can you help me debug this section of code? If I can learn how to spell section. Well, let's maybe just do code. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and see what GitHub Copilot here comes up with. I found the issue because you're checking for the active class in your CSS, but you're actually never adding that class to your buttons when they're clicked. That makes so much sense. Here you go. So it's telling me for document query selector. Event, filter buttons, perfect. So classless contains, cool. And then filter projects. So I need to add in this section in here, right? So remove this part first. So for document, hold on. Contains filter button, and then I should do the data filter after. So I should do the document query selector all above it, inside the if here. So it should go here, and then I should add the active list. Now, if I go ahead and go to my index.html, open preview, I have a feeling it'll work. Perfect. Okay, we got it. That's cute. Okay, I like that as a change. I think that's a really nice little addition. And it helps the buttons feel, you know, a little bit more fitting and everything, and makes it clear what's readable and what isn't. So I really like that as a quick little addition and positive change. Now what I want to do. Oh, silly me. I just realized I had a second step written up for what I wanted to do here. And then I never actually read it when I looked at it. That is so fun. And then in here, what I want to do is maybe potentially add some tabs or some animations or some nice general UI improvements. And then we'll spend some time talking about accessibility and SEO, and we'll see what else we can do. We'll update our GitHub, of course. Actually, now's a really good time to update our GitHub because we're right about halfway through my stream. So in case you're not familiar, we're going to say midpoint of part 2. I'm going to go ahead and commit and sync these changes up. I'm just using the interface here in my Visual Studio Code. But what I went ahead and set up yesterday on stream is my deployment on GitHub Pages. So also anybody here who's viewing from home, if you want to take a look at my specific web page, you can go ahead and do that straight from the comfort of whatever you happen to be doing. So if I take a look in here and then go to my GitHub Pages deployments, right, I'm going to go ahead and refresh my screen here really quickly and actually change it to that web page that we're looking at. So we go ahead and jump in here. All right, this is my lovely little website. As you can see, my GitHub Pages deployment is currently pending. So that means that it's still currently in the process of being set up and making sure that everything works correctly. So we're going to go and look into my GitHub Pages deployment, and you can actually see some of the runtime history here. And if I take a look at my checks, right, you can see my build, my report build status, and now my deploy is currently happening, right? So you can see how long this process took, what issues, if any, it ran into, and how we can continue from here, if any. So we're going to go ahead and let this thing cook for a little bit of time. If we take a look, we can also go back to some of my older GitHub actions so you can see how long they took. So the ones yesterday took about 30 to 40 seconds. This one is at slightly over a minute, right? Which of course, I know can be a little bit on the longer side. We're going to hope that it, figures itself out in a minute or two. And then from there, I should be able to show you all some of those really cool features. This is also a great time while I'm doing this to make sure that you go ahead and click on the link right below my face to check into this live stream. Make sure you get those sweet swag points and tell everybody how you came and had a good time. Always appreciated. Still doing the thing, which has me slightly concerned. But we're gonna power through. We're gonna power through. I believe in us. We'll see what it does. We'll see how it goes. I got a couple of things here coming up, and then we'll continue from there onto random things we might have to make. Hello, welcome on in. Still pending. That's really strange. That's a really long time for it to actually be pending, in my opinion. But, the benefit is that once it does actually pend and deploy, you'll be able to see it, right? And the change from yesterday, right? The change from yesterday, you can still see our live. We're going to hope that's just taking a little bit of time to sync up files for some reason. And that will hopefully settle itself in a second while we continue on and trudge on through the remainder of our plans for today. What I had in mind for next was potentially adding some little hover animations. All right, so if I take a look into my style.css, I do have a couple of project transitions, right, that I could add. So I did have, for some of these, some potential transitions that we could add in. Key, that would be in here. And then I could also add in some hover transitions as well with the transform and the box shadow. So I don't really like that transform of the falling. So I'll go ahead and add this one. And then I can also do that box shadow up here. Instead of doing RGBA here of 020202, actually, why is the RGBA here 0.1? I think I want to use the hex code here. That should be 797229. Cool. So I'm actually going to go back on this setting. That should be, so that should be 7970 and then 229. And then in here, same thing, 79, 70, 229. Cool. So I'm going to go ahead and run my preview again and take a look at what these look like. There you go. So you get a nice little pop-out effect with a little bit more box shadow all around it. Generally looking pretty cute. So, except you can't even see what I did because I forgot to change what screen I'm sharing. I hate when I do that. If I go into index.html, let me show you the changes I just made. I went ahead and went into my project tab here. I changed my box shadow for the colors to match the actual outline. Added a little transform transition, and then also added a hover transition here for scale, and then an increase in the box shadow. So about doubling it all around. So now if I go in here, right, and I take a look at it, you can see how the box shadow expands for each one of my lovely little items here. So that's generally an improvement. I'm going to check on our GitHub deployment because I'm worried about it. Still happening. Yikes. Okay. At this point, I think I'm going to honestly abort this one and try to start a new one and see if that helps it. but we'll see what's happening because it looks like it's stuck on the same portion. So what I want to do is I'm going to just go ahead and rerun it in here, and we're going to see what happens. Hopefully that will let me continue. I'm going to rerun just to deploy, and I'm going to see if that helps fix it from here. So I don't need to rerun the build or the similar, and I'll just go ahead and rerun that deploy. So let's see. Maybe something's happening. We'll see how that's going, but that's all good. Hopefully I didn't break my website. I would be really sad if I broke my deployment. But anyway, what I'm going to go ahead and do as well is add in a nice little button on top of this section that I'm just going to go ahead and call back to top. ID back to top. And then I want to add in this code in here. Back to top. And then in here, I'm going to go ahead and add in the button and then add in that text. And then I will add the CSS for it. So if we take a look at some of my button CSS, actually, I think that will work just fine. Although maybe my theme toggle, does my theme toggle have any additional styling? It does not. Oh, my little dog was so sneaky. And then in here, if I take a look, right, for visibility and scrolling and other similar items, if I take and go into this part, I'm going to add it right to the very bottom. Gives me const top back to top button. Get that element ID, add that event listener, scroll to that, and then continue from there. So that will probably be a good portion of that. I'm going to go ahead and click on my preview here again. And then in here, I should see my back to top button, which just takes me back to the top of the web page. So there you go. And that is another one of my lovely little sections. Now I'm worried about my deployment here. Why are you not deploying? I'll cancel this run. And I'm going to go to actions. Failed to cancel workflow. No. Canceled 2 minutes ago. Okay. Yes. So summary. Why is the job queued? Why is it not currently happening? That's what I'm confused on. So I wonder if I go in here. So this is just the canceled one, right? And I go to summary. Tab number 1. Yeah, that's the one that was canceled by me. I'm aware. Then this attempt has re-triggered 3 minutes ago. Total duration. So this is just the same deploy step. It's just the same step from here. Total duration is build deploy. Yep. Usage. Now if I go to actions, it won't let me cancel the run because it's telling me I'm failing to cancel it. That is so interesting. You know what? We might just have to give it a second try again. Oh, okay. There you go. Wait. Hold on. Looks like it's showing here as it's successful. Then here it's showing as failed. So who even knows what's happening? So if I go to deployments and GitHub pages, right, we can figure out what kind of happened. Then in here, enter deployments, it's showing as failed. Okay. Sorry, everybody. I'm taking a look at the GitHub logs. That's why you can't see my screen right now. Take a look at the deployment, please. Can I please just take a look at the deployment? objects have passed. I know that part. I'm asking what happened with the deployment. View the logs. Oh, it just canceled. Well, yes, I knew that. Okay, well, I guess we'll see. We'll try to push it up and then we'll see what happens and we'll continue from there. But in the meantime, let me see if I can add potentially some semantic tags and ARIA labels. So in here, I'm going to go ahead and add in some in my navigation class. I'm going to add in the ARIA label of main navigation, right? And then I'm also going to go ahead and give the header the role of banner. And then I don't think we need a class associated with it, so that should be good there. And then I don't have any images on my picture right now. So then in here, if I go into my meta data, I'm going to go ahead and add in some metadata tags. So right in here, I can go ahead and say meta description, right? Web developer portfolio, showcasing projects and skills for teaching purposes. And then we can also add in some projects, skills, and that should be good enough. There you go. And then in here, right, what now would be a good starting point is attempting to commit and push up all my changes. So I'm going to add here, completed part 2 changes so far, plus trying to fix deployment. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close out of this commit message. So it'll save. I'm going to sync it up, and then we'll continue from there. So I'm going to go ahead and switch back my screen here to my GitHub. So we've got this guy running. Lots of little deployment pages here. I'm going to close these tabs up here. And then it's running my current deployment right now. And it's running this build. So build succeed in 18 seconds. Report build status looks like is relatively quickly proceeding. And then my deployment is starting right now. That was so much faster. Great. So it looks like there was some sort of bug earlier that made it impossible for my deployment to actually finish. So I'm going to go ahead and take a look at my portfolio here, right? And we can actually see all of my changes, right, including keeping track of all the websites that I worked on, right, all the projects that I have, all the skills, everything, my back to top button, my toggle light dark mode buttons, right, and so many other options for things to work on, which are great, right? Because now we've got lots of different things that we can add in. Now, let's see. Are there any features in particular that we want to add? I think there can be a lot of different options. Of course, we could, try lots of different ideas. I think let's think about some potential options. Let me see if I can go ahead and come up with something that is worthwhile to add here. I've got a couple of things here to keep in mind. Let's see if I can think of a good idea. Now might be a good time for myself to go on a quick bathroom break, although I don't think I really need one. Might just be able to wait until the end of the stream. Well, we'll see. Let's see. We could do a highlight featured project. We could also try potentially animating the project when we change the filter order. I think I actually really like that one. So I'm going to do in here, I'm going to add in an animation that will be fade in 0.5 seconds ease, right? And then what I'm going to do is do an at keyframes fade in. So I want to fade in from opacity 0 to an opacity 1. And I kind of really want to try this out in a preview first. So I'm going to open this back up. I'm also going to go ahead and share my screen here. And now let's see. So now if I try this, I try some of the filters. Ooh, this is cute. Yeah, awesome. Okay, so I have some sort of interactive little options, right? Of clickability things on there. So that's, I think, a really cute little addition that helps add some pizzazz. I kind of want to pizzazz up the skills section as well. Because right now, compared to projects, it's looking a little sad. So we could do some skill grouping to replace the skill section. Maybe that could be fun. It's a couple different options. There could be, ooh, skill styling. And then let's do, maybe potentially we could do a group of skills and then style it. Let's start with that. So in here, what I want to do is instead of skills here, instead of creating one long list, I could create a different group of skills, right? So what I could go ahead and proceed from here is create one section of skills, right? That's dedicated to potentially front-end skills, right? And then in here, get that. So generally, as a general rule of thumb, make sure that we indent our sections of code correctly. So start here, go tap, tap, tap. Beautiful. All right, so we've got front end, UL class skill list, HTML5 semantic markup, CSS3, flex blocking grid, JavaScript, and responsive design. Sure, seems like a pretty comprehensive list. Only thing is, let's make sure this gets tabbed more over, except not this part. Perfect. Right, so that gets you a nice little class of skills. Then we could also add in a div class of skill groups, right, for backend work, right? Things like Node.js, Express, and so on and so forth. And then we could also add in tools and platforms, GitHub, VS Code, Chrome DevTools, Figma, right, as some potential examples. And then finally, you know, that should probably cover it, right? So in here, that covers, you know, some super, super simple kind of positive skill changes. So if we go into my preview here, right, and we take a look at my skills, now it's just I have, you know, 3 tabs and more skills really than just that. But what I think would be really more fun is getting some styling in here on these skills. So what I want to do is go to my skills section, right? Because I think that one looks a little bit sad. I want to do a couple of things. So I'm going to start with my .skills group. And I'm going to go ahead and do, you know, the margin bottom will be 2 rem. And then I will also go ahead and do some other styling. So for my skills groups, H3, I can add in a border and some padding. That's fine. And then I could also do my skills list, right? And then potentially try out some of these. And then for each individual line item, And then primary color and heading color, and then padding. And then in here, if I now go ahead and try this out, let's see if I go to my preview. Ah, cute. That's a nice little change, an overall improvement, right? So potentially some skills and things that look a little bit nicer and highlight this a little bit better. So let's see here. What else could we add on? I think this is a little bit fun. We could. There's a couple of changes and improvements that we can make here, right? Like we could tie skills to projects. We could set them up in JavaScript instead. Let's see. Let's try setting up skills with more JavaScript and tie them to projects. So in here, we're going to go ahead and say that we're going to define our skills, our projects will reference our skills, and then we'll continue from there. So in here, we could go ahead and start up with our project section, the same way that we start with our section for the projects, right? Or we can go ahead and add in a section for our skills, right? And so in here, if I actually take a look at these closer, right, I can go ahead and make sure that we've grabbed the same set of skills, right? So stuff like HTML5, CSS, but for now, I think this is a good starting point. And then in here, I think it would be really cool if we tied the skills to tags. So instead of them potentially, right, being the same, I think it would be really cool if we could manage to tie them to tags. So let's see. So we'll go and continue from that. So then in here, right, the main idea behind this change and this improvement is that I want to avoid having to list out the same information in multiple spots. So this way, I'm going to go ahead and create just one location for all of my skills, right? That will kind of tie them in with projects and get them working from here. So I've got some tags in here. I'm going to remove some of these that seem to be potentially not the most helpful. And then that will let us continue on from here. So now, if I go ahead and get all the skills, right? So I'm going to go ahead and create a little function right above here to get the skills. And then inside this portion, what I want to do is go to my index.html. And I think I should just be able to remove a lot of this lovely section, which would be, you know, generally pretty much a cool improvement. So we can do a div ID, maybe potentially like a skills list, right? And then I don't like the comment here about how it's saying it to be dynamically listed here. I'll close this div out here. If I go to script.js now, and then I go ahead and think about things here, let's grab the skills list and then go ahead and render my skills here. Right, so now if I go ahead and open up my preview again, what should happen? Well, these are kind of not styled, but in theory, they should all appear from the section. And then if we jump in here, I want to make sure that I can render these skills from the tags, right? So I get skills for each skill. Document create badge, class item add. Okay, interesting. And then instead of just adding the text name, what I think I want to try is do a const badge, create the element, skill badge, text content, append the child, and then try that. And then once again, of course, render the skills, right? I don't render skills. I don't need to do that because I have the function right now here. And then, of course, in my actual container, I should have the skill here, except the only difference is I don't have a skill badge. I change the skill list here. All right, this is what happens when I try to think about things too long. And then skill list. And then I don't think that I want to include any of this. So skill list would be, of course, this is the display portion, the border, the background color, and all of that. If I now preview my index.html, what does that look like? Still looks like a whole lot of gibberish. So in here, if I go to script.js, get all skills, right? And then I would return the skills for each of the actual skills. Right, is, well, skill item though. And that's why am I doing that twice? What I want to try here instead is I go ahead and do skill item. Class name, sure. Type content skill, append child. And then let me see here. Let's try and figure this out potentially. Why is my styling not showing up for my dynamic skills list? So let's see if we can figure it out based on the script.js file, also style.css, and maybe index.html. So there we go. The CSS is skill list li. It is definitely. Then there's a couple of sections. And also, I'm pretty sure if I take a look here, yeah, it's skill item. Okay, cool. So I want to do in here is get rid of my skill item, my skill list styling here, and then I do my skill item, background color. Sure, try that. And then let's give it a stab here now if I try to preview. There we go. That's better. Hooray. Okay, cool. Yeah. The span part is not for that. The span part is for actually for the highlighting of some other portions. Forgot which ones at this point. Might be view project maybe or something similar. Maybe my links or so on. But that part is not the portion in there. So I did remove that skill list li, which is totally fine. And then what I could do also is, let's think here about what is something else that I could potentially do. And of course I did this. Skills, badges, yep. And then All right, so I'm going to go ahead and come up with maybe one more thing to add in here, just to end us off on a good note. We'll see if I can get it working. Potentially, we've got a couple of options. Let's see here. Footers about the site. Ooh, so that you could like make a hidden section potentially. That could be fun. But I don't honestly know if that's a good thing for us to focus on here. So let's see if there's anything else that I want to finish off with. Potentially, right? Let's take a look at my light dark mode, make sure everything still looks okay. Right, for the most part, I think we're actually pretty solid here, right? Our modes are relatively minimal here. Links change, right? Our text is kind of the main thing that changes here. And then if I go ahead and proceed, right, there's a couple different options. Let's get our changes pushed up. So let's say part 2, fun features added, but they were definitely really fun. So I'm going to go ahead and commit this change and then sync that up, right? And that kind of goes ahead and creates that little section for us to focus on, which is pretty great. You know, that's, I think, really, really helpful. And not me losing myself in my virtual background as I attempt to fix my seat. There you go. And so now what I think is the best kind of spot for us to continue at is to share my screen here. Go back to my little lovely portfolio site. Oh, hi, Todd. My dog came to say hi. You can't see him. You can barely not see him. Oh, we're shaking. Hi, buddy. You need to eat dinner. You're hungry. I'm hungry too, but my dinner's not for another second. So I'm going to go ahead and close this out for a second. This is my lovely example now. What I've done is, of course, I've pushed up my changes, right? So you can see my fun features. Already a successful deployment. So it looks like, unfortunately or fortunately, that last bit was just a one-time fluke. So now if we click on all of our lovely sections, right? Remember, all of these are kind of, you know, spoofed links, right? So they don't actually take us anywhere besides back to the homepage, but they are good kind of stopping points for that. And then, of course, our sections do still take us to sections of our website, which is very fun, and then allow us to continue on here. Now, if we take a look at anything on here, is there anything else in particular that I want to talk about in the next 30 minutes? Honestly, we blazed through this part, so I don't really have, I was not expecting to have this like much time to work on things. For context, I came up with what felt like a decent amount of content, and we just completely ran through most of it. So, you know, it happens, of course, but let's do the following. So I'm going to go ahead and just highlight a couple of things I want to talk about. And then I also want to make sure that we're kind of in a good spot here. So if I take a look here, of course, knowing my luck, this is going to, there we go. Sweet. So we take a look here, right? At kind of all of the things we have going on, right? I can go ahead and take a look at a couple of our options. So if I do this, go ahead and go to here. Let's see how we're doing on top of this little lovely portion. So do-do-do, 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 do-do, do-do-do, 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 do-do-do. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I feel like we're in a pretty good stopping point. Like, I don't think I have a ton more to add here. So unfortunately, what I think is going to be our best bet here is coming in. Hi, Sophie. We're actually pretty much close to wrapped up, but this is actually a really good point to get us talking about a couple of things that we want to talk about. First of all, you're going to want to check in at that link right below me, that amelia.io/events. I'm also going to send it in the chat really quickly so that you can go ahead and grab it. I do not want to download Discord for Mac right now. Please do not. Thank you. And now if I go ahead and go into MLH and I grab my link from here, because I've got like 8 million tabs open, we can go ahead and copy this lovely portion. There you go. Beautiful. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and add in this lovely check-in link back into the chat. So if you're looking to still get your swag points for participating, joining me, and having a great time, you're going to want to first try out that link right on the bottom there. So that's going to be your first helpful handy dandy resource. The second thing that I'm going to go ahead and plug at this point is going to be our feedback form. So for any feedback that you have, your best bet to voice that feedback is going to be to go to this lovely link. I always like to make sure that I have this one spelled correctly because I've accidentally mistyped it a couple times. And then so let me try. See, this is what I was talking about. It's actually wrong. So I'm going to go ahead and point you to link/GHW feedback next. So for this portion, and I'm going to get to your question in a second. If you are looking to give me any feedback on this stream, if you stayed for the whole bit, for a portion, for most of it, either way, please make sure you let me know your thoughts, good, bad, ugly, something in between, whatever you thought of the stream, whether you liked it, you enjoyed it, you wish we did something more, you wish we did something different, or something similar. I always appreciate the feedback. It helps me, get better at my day-to-day. I do a lot of teaching, so sometimes it's also helpful for me to see like how hackers are interacting with the things I'm doing, making sure that they're understanding, making sure that if they want to follow along, they're able to follow along. If you're tuning in to just kind of listen to me chat for a little bit about Global Hack Week or about the specific topic, that works too. But make sure you go ahead and fill out that feedback survey, please. All right, at mlh.link/GHW feedback. And then we actually also have a really good question over from one of our viewers. It's saying, where do I find the older videos of this week? I missed a few. So I have a great link for you. I'm going to point you straight directly to our live section of our YouTube channel. So we do upload all of our stream VODs automatically to YouTube. So by the time that a stream ends, you will be able to see the VOD directly on YouTube. If you are watching on Twitch, right, we do not upload our VODs to Twitch. They don't stay on Twitch. They disappear after the fact. So keep that in mind, right? You won't be able to see our any of our existing videos on Twitch, at least not anything from this season or this Global Hack Week. But everything from here is going to be on YouTube unless it has to get deleted for some reason, which honestly very rarely happens. So if that's the situation or if there's something else going on, let's make sure that, or generally, right, you're going to want to look here. And this has everything that we've done for GHW for Beginners Week so far. So everything from opening ceremony to Figma dev mode to CLI 101, intro to data structures, intro to SQL, intro to Arduino, cloud computing, JavaScript from the ground up, part 1 and 2, agent mode and GitHub Copilot, right? More Figma dev mode. What is an API? Intro to HTML, CSS, intro to Python, intro to Java, or JavaScript from the ground up, intro to data structures and algorithms with Python, more today in Global Hack Week, right? Teaching a robot to balance from Jocelyn, which is always really sweet. Intro to web dev, intro to GitHub, getting good with Git, today in GitHub Global Hack Week Day 4. I'm just reading all these titles at this point for fun. Building your first app with AI responsibly. Really want to highlight this one because it's super fun. Intro to Gen AI web dev tools, web dev for beginners part 1, featuring yours truly. Embedded systems, MongoDB, nature of code, and then this stream, right? So you literally have, look at that, so many options. And if you ever feel overwhelmed by the sheer amount of options you have, make sure you go ahead and head on over to ghw.mlh.io to take a look at our schedule, right? So our schedule for Global Hack Week is going to have all of the upcoming streams. So you can also go ahead and figure out when the next ones are coming up. However, keeping that in mind, it is impossible to attend every stream, mostly because we are all people. We need to sleep, we need to eat, and all of the other fun things in between. So keeping that in mind, please do not attend every single session. We have coaches and members of the MLH community all around the world who are able to do these at hours that are most convenient for them, right? I stream from 6 to 8 p.m. in my case, right? So it's almost bedtime for me because, teacher schedule here. And I got to go to bed by 9 in order to get my sweet 8 hours of sleep. But, other coaches might stream at midnight because that's the time that works best for them. Midnight, I'm very much asleep, hopefully. Some coaches might stream at 10 a.m. Some coaches might stream at noon. Some coaches might stream at, 2:30 p.m. And then it just kind of depends on their time zones, right? So different time zones allow for different flexibility there as well, which is really helpful when we're trying to figure out, where you can stream, how you can stream, and things like that. So you've got lots of different options always. And hopefully that does answer your question. Let's see. I talked about the feedback form. I talked about all of the fun live streams. I gave you the schedule. I'm going to do one more thing, and that is encourage all of you to sign up for Global Hack Week in February, which I have to double check the topic. It's Data Week. Oh, very fun. So we're going to do Global Hack Week data up in February and then Global Hack Week in March. I am pretty much almost always at one of these at some point during the week. So feel free to come stop by to one of my later streams and say hi. I would love to have you here. And it would be lovely. No, don't feel like I'm just saying you don't have to. If your heart says that you want to, if this is what you desire, and if this is what you need, then I am happy that we are here for you as a resource. Speaking of upcoming streams, I'm looking forward to March. Me too. I love Cloud Week. I never know my favorite Global Hack Week, but I have a couple soft spots for a few of them. I think the very first one I did, I remember I was so nervous and I really tried to make sure I was doing the best job ever. And obviously I still try to make sure I do the best job ever, but nowadays I feel a little bit more comfortable, especially now that I spent, my day-to-day talking to children, listening to myself talk and kind of lecturing, or, working with them as they study computer science. I'm a little bit more comfortable with the actual teaching portion of Global Hack Week. We're also talking to a camera. So generally speaking, I think those things have gotten a little bit easier as time has gone on and a little bit less daunting, which is always fun. So, but I do miss the nostalgia of my first few. Let's see what we've got coming up next. Alberto is back. Looks like in a couple hours, about 2.5 for MongoDB 101 part 2. All right. So he'll be walking you through, kind of his launch into MongoDB. If you didn't miss part 1, I have great news for you. You've got just enough time to catch up on the VOD before part 2 starts, because I'm going to let you go in a couple of minutes here. And then last but certainly not least, make sure you tune in tomorrow morning to hear about today in Global Hack Week's day 6. And then you'll get to see some of the fun things we've got going on in terms of Nature of Code part 2, Data Structures and Algorithms Python part 3, and MongoDB 101 part 3. So, and then you've got closing ceremony, and that'll be it. And it'll be beautiful, and you'll have a great time, and you will look forward to your next Global Hack Week imminently. I have talked myself out for the time being, I think, but I will stay on for a few more minutes for any questions. I'm going to leave the music on, and I'll stay on for a couple more minutes. If there isn't any questions, or if there are questions, I'll make sure to answer them as they come in. Let me turn on the little music background, and then we'll continue from there. I'm going to make it there. And then, of course, watch. Be a great time. So, beautiful, beautiful. Let's see here. Thanks for having us. Good night, Kari and Todd. Oh, thank you. Todd says good night as well. He is fast asleep. We're going to go on an evening walk shortly. We had a pretty long walk today, but it was on the tougher side because I came from work a little later than expected. There were so many dogs around everywhere, and they were all going crazy and barking and being loud. And Todd does not like loud things. He was trying to pull and be annoying. So That was all good though. We survived. He did great. I did great. So we are all good. And yeah, so we're going to enjoy a nice little evening walk. He's going to eat dinner. I'm going to eat dinner. And then it'll be a beautiful time. So yeah. But see you in Global Hack Week data in February. Right on Valentine's Day, I think. Yeah. Yep. Clashing with Valentine's Day. And last but certainly not least, if you are going to be attending one of our MLH member event hackathons, you may see me. I had to take a bit of a break from going to events in person due to work and all of those fun things going on. But I'll be back in an event maybe near you, maybe far away in February. So stay tuned. I'll keep the event a secret, but I will be there. So it'll be a fun time. All right, I'm going to see if there's any more questions. I think we are pretty much all talked out as a big group. So we should be all chill. And that will be it. And that'll be beautiful and fantastic and wonderful. And we will see each other in a few short weeks, probably about a month. And that will be all from yours truly. Once again, thank you very much for coming. It was lovely to hang out with you today. Thanks for the relatively engaged audience and for hanging out with me this whole time. And I will see you all very, very shortly. Bye, everybody. I've been using the wrong beginner screenshot the whole time, and I just realized because this has the wrong date on it. This is August, and this is January. That's very funny. Bye for real with the correct screenshot. See y'all.